Invitation, and I will start showing this thing that amazed me, the picture you see in the back. This is a sticker that I found in the Mission District in San Francisco a few days ago, and it looks a strange thing. So, It Can't Happen Here is a novel by Sinclair Lewis, written in 1935, and it says the story of the rise of a fascist dictator in the United States. And it was based, they say, on the adventure of the Louisiana governor U.P. Long, who was to become a candidate to the United States presidency before being killed in 1934, I think. But the thing is that the picture that depicts the book, the novel, is clearly a Donald Trump. And so you see Donald Trump waving his hand in the fascist salute, and it's a sort of, I don't know how to call it, provocation or something, maybe just an advertising for reading the book, and say the thing, it can't happen here, is something many people say, we Italians have said it many times, it can't happen here, and then it sometimes happens. And by the way, in the book, the dictator of America invaded Mexico and put a sort of military force to control the country, and the only resistance in the country was in Vermont. But I start from this because, in fact, Donald Trump, the candidate we are talking about today, in Donald Trump times, in this moment, is being compared to previous other leaders, personalities. One has been Mussolini, and the other one has been Silvio Berlusconi. And my task today is to tell you the story of Silvio Berlusconi adventure. Silvio Berlusconi has been, he is still alive, but has been in his political career many things, and he reigned over Italy for something like 20 years, from 1994 to 2012, 13, something like 20 years. And the similarities of the two persons, there are. First of all, there are two tycoons, and they made their money and their fortune in construction. They have a lot to do with media. They are billionaires, both of them. They have an extraordinary ego. They believe very much in themselves, you know. And they build a political organization. They want to have power. They want to how would you say, to arrive to conquer power. They want to be loved by people. And at the same time, they have a lot of problems with their body. Silvio Berlusconi was very short, for example, and he was bald. And he is, I think, the first president who had a hair transplant while in office. And he used to put a big amount of makeup on his face and a lot of perfumes. And he was obsessed by this, by thinking of his body, his face, his smile. He had a terrific smile, it's a very big smile. Donald Trump is quite different. He's a tall man. There has been some problems here with little hands, tall, and this and that. But he likes to be known and to show himself as a big man, and you know, with this big blonde hair and this very red face, etc. He smiles less, I would say, but these body similarities are interesting. If we want to put another similarity, which is not completely absurd, because Donald Trump has been compared to Mussolini as well. Mussolini too had a problem with his hair, and he was a trendsetter, because Mussolini started to lose his hair while he was in his 30s. And instead of doing as everybody, you know, you keep this hair on the round of your head and you lose it on the top, you lose it on the top. He decided the radical thing, and he shaved, the total shave. The Mussolinian total shave was something absolutely new for the 30s in those times. Well, now, I have to tell you why how come that so strange person came to power in Italy in 1993? And I first have to tell you that in 1993, that means 23 years ago, Italy was a sixth industrialized country in the world. United Europe was not yet in place. The euro was not there. We had the lira as the national currency, as all the other European states have their own currency. And we, Italians, we were a solid democracy with alternance of power, and not a complete alternance of power, but anyway a parliamentary democracy. But a lot of things started happening in the two preceding years, 1994. First of all, there was a big wave of judicial prosecutions against politicians. And this was a wave of things that interested many cities in Italy, especially Milano and Roma, and it ended with the arrest for corruption of the biggest political leader in Italy. And parties like the Christian Democrats, who were the most important party of Italy from the end of the war, were completely destroyed, were dissolved. The symbol didn't exist anymore. So that same thing happened for the Socialist Party, which was an historic party. The Social Democrats, the Liberal, the Republicans, everybody was just being vanished by this judicial sweep, I would say. In this situation, we were to go to general elections. The only party who was not that much touched by this sweep was the former Communist Party that changed its name, and it was named now Partito Democratico della Sinistra. Then you had another thing that happened quite with a big, velocity. It was the rise of a new party called the Northern League. So the Northern League took place in the north of the country, which is the richest part of the country, Pianura Padana, Piedmont, Lombardy, Veneto, and I would add is one of the richest places on the planet. It's the most industrialized place, and this movement was against the unity of Italy. They say, we don't want to pay taxes anymore to the south of Italy. The south of Italy are all mafiosos, they don't want to work, and we don't want them anymore with us. We want to have our own place, our own nation, etc. And this phenomenon, it was quite racist, as a matter of fact, gained the favor of something like 30% of the people in the north. In the same time, just to add things, because the situation was quite peculiar, we had a wave of bomb attacks by the mafia in Sicily. I think everybody remembers the killing of the two leading investigators, Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino, who were killed in a very spectacular way, like a highway that blew, and the car was hit, in a building that was torn down to kill the other judge. And the state reacted, sending the army to Sicily for the first time after the Second World War. The army was deployed in the streets, in the square of Palermo and the whole Sicily. And then there was another wave of bombs in Roma, in Milano, in Florence, that were very mysterious. Anybody knew exactly what was happening. Well, this was the situation. So it was a very, very tense situation. And out of the blue, and nobody would have expected, came out Silvio Berlusconi. So Silvio Berlusconi never had any kind of political commitment before, but he was a very well-known person because he was a big constructor, and he was most of all the important owner of the soccer team Milan Football Club, which at the time was the best soccer European team. He was the tycoon of the commercial TV. He owned three major channels of the commercial TV. and he owned the most important publishing house, Mondadori. He owned a bank. He owned an insurance company. He was married to a lovely TV star, movie star. He had 5 children, and he came one day on the TV in all the homes, in all the houses of Italy, with a taped message saying, "I love this country, and I don't want this country to fall in the hands of communists. So I'm going to be the candidate for my own party. My own party is named Forza Italia," which is a very popular way of saying, you say it in the stadium, you know, to support your team, Forza Italia. And we were going to participate to the election, and we were going to change Italy, and I'm going to promise you a new miracle, the new Italian miracle. He used a lot this word, the new Italian miracle, which was a period that we always refer to, sort of a gilded period just after the Second World War, when Italy had an extraordinary economic development, and that it was called the Italian miracle. You know, factories and big cities building, etc., and welfare. And he promised to create 1 million jobs. He promised to reduce taxes. He promised to raise pensions. He promised everything to everybody. And he started his campaign that was, for the first time, completely different from any other campaign, political campaign we had in Italy. You know, politicians in Italy were used to be, you know, gray people, and he was very eloquent. He spoke very well. He was very convincing. He smiled a lot. He sent the story of his life to something like 10 million people in Italy. It was a magazine. It was called An Italian History. And everybody received it and saw the story of this little guy who started from nothing, this self-made man, etc., and built Milano, and then everything. You know, it was like a picture magazine, very. And then he started this campaign that lasted something like 3 months, in which he spent a fortune, really. The amount of money he put in that was staggering. Every moment of the state television or his private television were covered with his ads, with the, you know, Forza Italia everywhere. This jingle was in the head of everybody, etc. And he won the elections. But I have to tell you that he had a sort of a genius thing, because he put together in a coalition 2 things that nobody could have thought that could be possible. The Northern League, that was this sort of, you know, let's say, extremely regionalist party, and the former fascist party. Nobody wanted to have anything to do with that party before that. But that party was still quite strong in the south, in the center and the south. He put together these 3 parties, Forza Italia, the Northern League, and the former fascist party that now was called Alleanza Nazionale, and that coalition got the majority, and he got the government. First thing he did, just in case, you know, to do this comparison, if something could happen, you know, in this country, he named his lawyer, his personal lawyer, Ministry of Justice. He named his fiscal consultant Ministry of Economy. His party, Forza Italia, was his personal party and had no kind of democracy inside the party. You know, there were no elections, there were no minority or majority in the party, there was no debate. He was the one who chose the candidates. He was the one who did everything, you know. And there was something that was called in Italy at the time the conflict of interest. So that means that, and it's valid, still valid for local elections or things like that, that says that if you have any kind of concession by the state, you know, for example, you are a contractor for public works, or you give water to some village or something like that. You can't hold a political position, a public position that can interfere with your interest. So in this case, the conflict of interest of Silvio Berlusconi was enormous, absolutely enormous, because he owned practically the whole information in Italy. Becoming the head of the government, he was the head of the Italian state television. That summed with his 3 other channels meant that he owned something like 90% of the information of the media in Italy. But that was not, wasn't supposed to be a big problem. Now, what does it happen when a businessman takes power? Because everybody, the people who voted Berlusconi, voted him because they were really thinking that a businessman could fix things better than politicians. Politicians were not loved at all. A lot of bureaucracy, a lot of corruption, as we have seen. Many were in jail, etc. And to see a person who had success, who had created things, who had done things, etc., was considered, a sort of good thing to do, good thing to follow. His experience as a businessman given to politics didn't work at all. Italy wasn't at all touched by this Midas touch. It would say, oh, here comes the guy who can change things. Job didn't increase, taxes were a little reduced. What Berlusconi did, in fact, was only to preserve his interests. He was very, very, I would say, he was very completely referred to preserve his money, to preserve his allies' money, to take taxes out the rich people, to have favorable law, and for this loopholes, for all this kind of, we have in Italy very big tax evasion that increased in that case. And so this was his major interest. And on the other side, the other interest was not to be put in jail. This was his problem from the beginning, because he had problems with his big companies. There were audits, there were investigation about where his money came from, if he paid taxes or not, etc. And this was the main point of all this the next 20 years in Italy, was that his battle, personal battle, against judges and against investigations, against judicial investigation. And he he transformed that thing in a political issue. He said that the Communist Party had been beaten into the election, but he wanted to take revenge by putting him in jail, using judges who secretly were members of the Communist Party. So this sort of paranoia of the communist judges and the Communist Party, and occupied the Italian story for something like 20 years. And he had the parliament to work on solving his personal problems for a lot of time. The Italian parliament wanted to pass law by which the president of the government couldn't be put in jail. The president of the government couldn't be indicted. The president of the government couldn't have a trial when he was in office. And all these things that went on for years and years and years. At the end of the story, Berlusconi fell for 2 reasons. Not for the consensus. The Italian people always gave him very huge consensus. They liked him. Berlusconi won 3 elections and lost 2. The 2 elections he lost were against a coalition of all the other parties together, against Forza Italia, and this coalition won in a very tight way, and after a year in one case and 2 years in another, they collapsed for internal divisions. So in the next election, Berlusconi would come again in force. I remember especially one in which in 2001 the consensus was so high that, for example, in Sicily, which is one of the main agents to win the election, the most important agent to win the election, there were 61 senators to be elected, and the Berlusconi party won 61-0. That was something that never happened in history of Italy. And he took the fascists in power. We had fascist ministers, we had Northern League ministers who changed constitution in a racist way. We have all these things. We have the black shirts going around. We had in the north, the Northern League having the paramilitary forces to protect people against immigrants. We have all this kind of stuff in Italy with a big consensus of the population. Here we have a guy called Francesco Spagnolo. At the time of 2001 election, he was the conductor of a classic music program on the state radio. And the day that came this election that was so enormous, the favor he had, Berlusconi, with all this coalition, he put the first tune, the first music he put on the radio was Springtime for Hitler and Germany, from the producer of my books. And I don't know if that costed him something.
He brought me here.
But this was the situation. Berlusconi was very popular. There was an earthquake, a big earthquake in Italy. Berlusconi said, I'm going to fix it. He went there, etc. His popularity was something like 80%. And then came the story nobody could have imagined. His wife wrote a letter to the Repubblica, which was the anti-Berlusconi daily paper, saying, my husband is a dangerous sex addict, and he is a perverted man who is having stories with an underage girl, who is promising this girl a political career, who is promising to name this girl member of the Congress, and you have to do something because I, as a wife, I am terribly concerned, not only of his health and things, etc., but the future of this country. And from there started something like 5 years in which Italy discussed nothing else than Berlusconi's sexual life. And that was something, I think no other country had the same thing in the world. I never imagined something like that. We found out that he had something like a list of 125 girls who he wanted to have party with in his big villas. Berlusconi was known to have these big villas, one in Milano, one in Sardinia, etc. And it was a very, it was a thing that was very organized. He used his time when he was the president of the government to organize these parties. He rented a big building in Milano to put all the girls together so that he could have them at the moment and move them, etc. He was completely, absolutely absurd. And as you know, probably because Italy became famous for that, these parties had this name Bunga Bunga. And so Italy and the Italian became famous in the world because of the Bunga Bunga. Now, among all these things, there was a girl who was a Moroccan girl, who was an underage girl, and she participated to these parties, etc. And so Berlusconi was put on trial for having sex with an underage girl. He answered that he didn't know she was underage, and the second thing, he said that this girl was the niece of Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak, so she had a sort of diplomatic status that had to be preserved. The parliament voted for that. The parliament voted, he is right, she must have a diplomatic status because she is the niece of Egyptian President Mubarak. By the way, she was Moroccan, she was this was it. Things went on like that for something like, I said, something like 5 years, and the economy of Italy declined. We had of course the effects of the big crisis, the world crisis of 2008. Berlusconi was incapable of doing anything to face the crisis. Level of corruption was becoming again enormous, and the European countries just put a sort of ultimatum against Italy to change government or to face what was called and was probably going to be a sort of Argentinian default. So there was a sort of mild, I would call it like that, mild coup d'etat, in which Berlusconi was forced to resign and instead was put a technical, so-called technical government that lasted 2 years, and after that we had new elections. In the same time, the only one of the many prosecution that Berlusconi had went to an end, and he was condemned for fiscal fraud in 2012. After that condemned, it was final. He couldn't appeal anymore. He was kicked out from the Senate. He was taken away the honorificence of Cavalier. He was called the Cavaliere. He's an ex-Cavaliere now. And he was given, he can't be a candidate to any kind of election anymore in his life. He spent some time not in a jail, but having a sort of giving assistance to old and poor people in an institution. He did that for a year. Now he is 80 years old. His party is in the polls something like 8%, 9%. He doesn't count anymore anything. His power has sort of dissolved. He's going to sell the football team. He's probably going to sell some of his TV power, etc. And so the story is finished. But I want to tell you, the story didn't finish in a good way. To me, I would say this: the experience of Berlusconi proves that it's very difficult to stop a person like that who can ask consensus to the people and can ask vote on a very radical and I would say anti-democratic way. That was a shock to find out that in Italy many people wouldn't care at all if he had a conflict of interest. Many people didn't care. Many people didn't care to see the fascist again in the government, and it was okay for them. We found out again that the opposition, the parliamentary opposition, was not that strong, and they accepted very much the time being. They didn't do much. They didn't attack Berlusconi. We found out that the power of the press in Italy was not that much. There was no independent investigation on his fortunes, on his ties to the mafia, which was found after his decline. His number two, the founder of his party, is now spending time in jail because he has been condemned as a white collar of the mafia, the Sicilian mafia. So all of this gives me the impression that we have to be sort of aware of what can happen. And the phrase "it can't happen here," we used to say it in 1993. Oh, it can't happen here. We are cultured country. We are not going to permit that, and we did it. We did it for 20 years, and so things can happen. I would add another thing. There are similarities and there are many differences between the two persons we are talking about. But a certain reflection about the fact that in all countries a large base of angry population exists. And this angry population doesn't want to accept many times values of solidarity, values of democracy, values of equality, and wants to have a supremacy for the things their supremacy has been taken away from them. And this is a basis that exists everywhere, I would say. Well, in this country, it surely exists. In the history of this country, some what we call, populist, under quotes, candidates have done things like that. In the case of Berlusconi, it was a sort of, how it was better when we didn't have all these unions, we didn't have all these taxes, we didn't have all these immigrants. That was the main point. We had our own currency and we didn't have the euro. We didn't have all these people in other countries who tell us what to do. We didn't have all these judges with their laws. And that was the idea of the old good times of Italy, the miracle of Italy. And I think this make America great again is a little bit the same thing. When things were better because there weren't so many Mexicans around, there wasn't terrorists, there wasn't this big governments putting your hands in your private life and things like that. So there are some kind of similarity. How do you defend yourself from this wave? Well, it's not easy. It's not easy. What the lesson that Italy gave is that you have a public opinion, which probably is the most important thing to have with you and to tell things, but the importance of having a free press is very, very much important. And if somebody controls the press, the vast majority of the press, as Berlusconi did in Italy for 20 years, this is going to be a big problem. This is the really big problem. You don't need to have a military force. You don't need to have an army or to be aggressive in the streets. But if you can have, the control on the media, that's the new form of to be authoritarian. This is the second thing. The other thing that I can say is that some institution in Italy resisted to this wave. The judiciary resisted. The Supreme Court, which is called in Italy the Constitutional Court, and when he asked to have special powers and not to be prosecuted, they opposed, and it was difficult to oppose him. And the other institution that opposed Berlusconi was not Italy, but was Europe. Europe never liked him, and I have to say, while he was Berlusconi a great friend of the former President George W. Bush, he was not at all a fan of the actual President Barack Obama. And the international isolation of Italy counted a lot at the end for his ending. So this is the story and the reflection about the Berlusconi experience in Italy, and I think the situation here is completely different. So if you have a question to ask me, I'd like to answer.